If you feel like you're behind in your LSAT prep, this one's for you. If you're taking the LSAT in just a couple weeks or so, you don't want to spend your time studying rare question types that hardly ever come up. Instead, you want to focus on the most common types, the ones that show up consistently exam after exam after exam. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the most common question types on each section of the LSAT and give you a bit of advice on how to approach each. For logical reasoning, the most common types are inference, flaw, and necessary assumption. For inference, we have two types: must be true and most strongly supported. So you want to make sure that you're crystal clear on the differences between the two types and how to approach them. For both inference types, we're typically dealing with fact sets rather than arguments, so don't expect a conclusion to necessarily appear when you're looking at this type. Now, must be true questions are looking for something that is 100% guaranteed by the stimulus, meaning there's no ambiguity at all. It's definitely the case. In contrast, for most strongly supported questions, we're looking for a reasonable assumption based on the fact set or information in the stimulus. It is incredibly likely, but not necessarily 100% guaranteed. We're also looking at flaw questions. For flaw questions, you want to ID the flaw. That is your only job. You're not looking to do anything to the argument, rather to just simply recognize what is the major gap or problem in the argument. This could involve classic logical fallacies, so make sure that you've brushed up on the most common flaws that are classic. So for example, necessary versus sufficient confusion, correlation causation, ad hominem, and things of that nature. Then we have necessary assumption questions, which in my view, and this is a little controversial, necessary assumption questions are actually a very specific kind of must be true question. This is why the negation or denial technique works, where we run through each of the 5 choices, and the correct choice, when negated, destroys the argument, because after all, it was required by the argument. If we are logically committed to the stimulus, if we assume the stimulus as given, then we are logically committed to all the underlying necessary assumptions as well. Now, for reading comprehension, of course, we have natural science, social science, humanities, and law as the 4 major topics of reading comp passages. Within the passages, we have general global questions like main idea, primary purpose, passage organization, best title, tone, and author's opinion. You'll then have all your local detail-oriented questions that require a bit more going back to the passage. And then finally, you'll have your more inferential questions that require reading between the lines. But the easiest type within a reading comp set is going to be that first category, the general global questions like main idea and primary purpose. So with limited time to study and limited time on test day, of course, focus your efforts on the lowest hanging fruit, since all questions are worth the same. Focus on making sure that you can extract from your read of the passage, what is the main idea? What is the purpose of this passage? If the author could leave us with only one central idea, what would that be? Extract that key information, solve all those general global questions. Those are your low-hanging fruit. Then the questions that require details and supporting examples, you can always go back to the passage and find that when you need to, but don't try to absorb it all at once, because you'll just end up feeling overwhelmed. As a benefit here, you layer your understanding, building it as you go. So as you solve the general global questions, you'll gain a better and better, more in-depth understanding of the passage text, and then you'll be in a better position to solve those more specific questions that require more going back for the details or require a bit more reading between the lines to make inferences. Now, for logic games, the last section, the one that's going away after the June LSAT, I didn't want to leave you incomplete if you're taking it before then, so of course, let's cover games as well. There are many types of logic games, but there are a couple of big ones that show up most consistently. We have ordering games, grouping games, and combinations of both. The rare ones, the pattern ones, the curveball ones, those show up less consistently and are not as similar to each other as the ordering and grouping are. So if you have limited time, focus on what shows up most often, namely ordering and grouping games. We have different subtypes within each, but just make sure that you are familiar with the most common diagram formats for each of those types. LSAC repeats themselves again and again and again. There are many games that are virtual carbon copies of each other, and so if you could do all the old games, you're going to be able to do the new ones as well, but focus your efforts on ordering and grouping, since those show up most consistently, and make sure that you are really good at solving the orientation questions, which are your gimme warm-up question. And as a tactic for efficiency here, when you're going through the orientation question, don't go one choice at a time, applying all 5 rules or so to the choice. Instead, go one choice at a time and apply all the rules to that given choice, because it's much easier. And by the way, a quick tactic for solving those orientation questions, rather than going through one choice at a time, applying all the rules to that choice, it's much more efficient to go one rule at a time and check all 5 choices for violations, because you're only holding one rule in your head rather than cycling through all the rules again and again and again. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. I hope you found the video helpful. If you did, please do me a favor and share it with someone who needs to see it. I don't do any advertising for the channel. I rely only on word of mouth to help get the word out, so your spreading this video really does make a difference. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.